He swore he'd never take a black mail-order bride, until she stepped off the train with tears in her eyes, clutching a letter that would shatter everything he thought he knew about his own life. The townspeople of Copper Ridge whispered that the bitter rancher would die alone on his failing ranch, another hermit consumed by grief and debt. They assumed his isolation meant weakness, his silence meant defeat. But when the educated woman from back east arrives with correspondence bearing his name, correspondence he never wrote, their worlds collide in ways neither expected. She possesses knowledge that could save his land, while he offers the belonging she's spent her life seeking. Yet someone in town orchestrates events from the shadows, and the railroad surveys appearing near his property aren't coincidental. Both their futures hang on a deception neither created, and powerful men will do anything to claim what lies beneath their feet. Will two outcasts discover who's pulling the strings before they lose everything that matters? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The weathered rancher stood at the edge of Copper Ridge's dusty train station, watching passengers spill onto the platform like scattered coins. Ethan Cole never came to town unless he absolutely had to. Today, he needed supplies and nothing more. The whispers started the moment his boots hit the wooden planks. They always did. There's that hermit from Broken Arrow Ranch. Lost his whole family to the fever. Been alone ever since. Shame how a man can just give up on living. Ethan pulled his hat lower and ignored them. 3 years of this treatment had taught him that silence cut deeper than any response he could offer. The townspeople had already written his story. Bitter widower, failed rancher, man destined to die alone with only his debts for company. Sheriff Harlan Briggs approached from across the platform. The old lawman was the closest thing Ethan had to a friend, though even that friendship felt strained by years of isolation. "Ethan, good to see you in town. Need supplies?" Harlan studied him with weathered eyes. "You look thinner every time I see you. When's the last time you had a proper meal?" Ethan didn't answer. The sheriff meant well, but pity felt worse than scorn. The train whistle pierced the desert air. Black smoke billowed as the afternoon express rolled to a stop. Passengers began stepping down. Families reunited with embraces. Businessmen straightened their jackets and headed toward the hotel. Cowhands spat tobacco juice and looked for the nearest saloon. Then she appeared. The woman stepped carefully onto the platform, her dress a deep blue that seemed too fine for this dusty corner of nowhere. She clutched a single leather suitcase in one hand and a worn envelope in the other. Her dark skin gleamed with perspiration from the long journey, but she held herself with a dignity that made the other passengers seem crude by comparison. She scanned the crowd with hopeful eyes. Those eyes found no recognition anywhere. Ethan watched from his position by the water barrel. Something about her stillness in the midst of all that movement caught his attention. She wasn't just waiting, she was searching. Station Master Jenkins waddled over to her, his belly straining against his vest buttons. "You looking for someone, miss?" "Yes, sir. I'm expecting to meet someone. A Mr. E. Cole?" Ethan's blood turned to ice water. "E. Cole?" Jenkins scratched his balding head. "You mean Ethan Cole? The rancher?" The woman's face brightened. "Yes. We've been corresponding about—" Her voice trailed off as she noticed the expression on Jenkins' face. The station master looked around the platform until his gaze landed on Ethan. "That's him over there, the tall one by the water barrel." Every eye on the platform turned toward Ethan. He felt exposed, like a rabbit caught in an open field. The woman looked at him with expectation that slowly transformed into uncertainty. Ethan had never seen her before in his life. She walked toward him with measured steps, her heels clicking against the wooden planks. The crowd parted around her, whispers following in her wake. "Mr. Cole?" Her voice carried education and refinement that seemed impossible in this rough place. Ethan noticed her hands trembling slightly as she held the envelope. "I'm Eliza Washington, from St. Louis." The name meant nothing to him. The envelope in her hands might as well have been written in a foreign language. "We've been corresponding for months about the arrangement." Ethan's throat felt like sandpaper. What arrangement? The hope in her eyes flickered. She opened the envelope and pulled out several sheets of paper covered in neat handwriting. The letters you sent, about marriage, about starting a new life together. Ethan stared at the papers. The signature at the bottom read E. Cole in flowing script, but the handwriting wasn't his. His own writing looked like chicken scratches compared to this elegant penmanship. I never wrote these. The words came out harsher than he intended. Eliza flinched as if he'd struck her. The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama unfolding. Councilman Jeremiah Stone pushed through the gathering onlookers. His expensive suit and gold watch chain marked him as the most important man in Copper Ridge. What seems to be the problem here? Stone's eyes moved from Ethan to Eliza with obvious distaste. His expression suggested he'd found something unpleasant on the bottom of his shoe. This woman claims she has correspondence with Cole about some arrangement. Stone examined the letters with theatrical interest. These appear to be legitimate documents, signed and dated. His voice carried across the platform. Though I must say, this seems like a rather unusual situation for our community. The crowd murmured, "Agreement." Ethan could feel their judgment settling over him like a heavy blanket. Eliza stood frozen in the center of attention, her dignity intact but her composure cracking. A single tear rolled down her cheek. I sold everything I owned to come here. I have nowhere else to go. The platform fell silent except for the distant sound of cattle lowing in the stockyards. Ethan looked at this woman who had traveled hundreds of miles based on letters he'd never written. Someone had used his name. Someone had made promises he'd never made. But she was here now, alone and vulnerable in a place that clearly didn't welcome her. His moral code, the same code his father had beaten into him with words and example, wouldn't let him walk away from someone in need, even if that someone represented everything he'd tried to avoid. You can stay at my ranch tonight, until we figure this out. The crowd erupted in surprised chatter. Stone's face darkened with disapproval. Sheriff Briggs nodded with something that might have been approval. Eliza looked up at him with gratitude that made his chest tight. Thank you. Ethan loaded her suitcase into his wagon without another word. As they drove away from the station, he could feel the weight of every stare burning into his back. The wagon wheels creaked across the dusty trail toward Broken Arrow Ranch. Eliza sat beside Ethan in silence, her hands folded over the mysterious letters. The evening sun painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Ethan's ranch house appeared on the horizon like a weathered monument to loneliness. Peeling paint hung from the siding in strips. Weeds choked the front porch. Fence posts leaned at odd angles, held upright more by habit than strength. It ain't much, Ethan said. Eliza studied the property with calculating eyes. It has good bones. Inside, dust motes danced in the fading light. The parlor held a single chair and a table stacked with unopened mail. Ethan gestured toward a bedroom door. You can have my room. I'll sleep in the barn. That's not necessary. It is. Eliza set her suitcase down and pulled out the letters again. She spread them across the table like evidence at a trial. Someone wrote these using your name. The question is who? Ethan examined the papers more carefully. The handwriting was feminine, educated. Each letter spoke of loneliness and hope for companionship. They painted him as a thoughtful man seeking a partner to share life's burdens. This ain't how I talk, he said, pointing to a flowery passage about watching sunsets together. But someone knows you well enough to forge your signature. A knock at the door interrupted their investigation. Ethan opened it to find Clara Martinez standing on his porch. The school teacher held a basket of food and wore guilt like an uncomfortable dress. I brought supper, she said quietly. Clara's eyes found Eliza across the room. The two women studied each other with careful interest. Miss Martinez teaches at the schoolhouse, Ethan explained. Clara set the basket down and wrung her hands. I need to tell you something, both of you. The confession spilled out in a torrent of words. Clara had written the letters. She had corresponded with Eliza for months, using Ethan's name and inventing a romance that existed only on paper. "I thought you were both so lonely," Clara said. "You never talked to anyone, Ethan. And Miss Washington's letters were so full of hope." Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "You had no right." "I know. I'm sorry." Eliza remained remarkably calm. "You deceived us both." "Yes, but I truly believed you would suit each other." The room fell silent. Ethan expected anger to consume him, but instead he felt something unexpected: relief. Clara had seen something worth saving in him. Someone had cared enough to try. "What's done is done," he said finally. Over the following days, an unusual partnership developed. Eliza proved invaluable around the ranch. Her education became apparent when she examined Ethan's financial records. "Your bookkeeping is a disaster," she announced, spreading ledgers across the kitchen table. She worked with methodical precision, organizing receipts and calculating expenses. Her findings painted a grim picture. "You're 3 months behind on your bank payments. Someone has been overcharging you for feed, and these property tax assessments look inflated." Ethan leaned over her shoulder to study the numbers. She smelled like lavender soap and determination. "How do you know all this?" "I helped manage my father's business in St. Louis. Men assumed I was just decorative, so they spoke freely around me." Her intelligence impressed him. More than that, she attacked problems instead of accepting defeat. Word of their arrangement spread through town like wildfire. Some neighbors offered cautious acceptance. Others made their disapproval clear through cold stares and whispered comments. Banker Thomas Webb visited the ranch on a Thursday morning. His expensive suit looked out of place among the dusty corrals. "Cole, we need to discuss your situation." Webb's eyes lingered on Eliza with obvious distaste. She served coffee with perfect politeness while he outlined Ethan's financial obligations. "Payment is due within 30 days. No extensions." After Webb left, Ethan found a threatening note nailed to his fence post. "She don't belong here. Neither do her kind." That evening, Sheriff Briggs stopped by with disturbing news. "Someone cut your north fence, scattered about 20 head of cattle." "Any idea who?" "Jeremiah Stone's been asking questions about your ranch. Specific questions about acreage and water rights." Eliza listened from the kitchen doorway. "What kind of questions?" "The kind a man asks when he's interested in buying." Later, as they cleaned up the scattered cattle, Eliza proved she could handle ranch work despite her refined appearance. She rode well and showed no fear of the animals. "You didn't learn this in St. Louis," Ethan observed. "My grandmother raised horses in Kentucky. I spent summers there as a child." Her past revealed itself in fragments. An educated family destroyed by economic hardship. Dreams deferred by circumstance. Strength forged through adversity. "Why did you really come west?" Ethan asked. "Because staying meant accepting limitations others placed on me." Their conversations stretched longer each evening. Ethan found himself sharing memories he'd buried with his family. Eliza spoke of dreams that extended beyond mere survival. "I want to belong somewhere," she admitted. "Not just exist, but truly belong." "Belonging ain't easy to find." "No, but it's worth the search." More incidents followed. A hay barn mysteriously caught fire. Supplies went missing from town orders. Each setback pushed them closer to financial ruin. But the harassment also strengthened their partnership. They worked together with increasing efficiency. Her intelligence complemented his practical skills. His steady presence balanced her fierce determination. One morning, Eliza made a startling discovery while reviewing property documents. "Ethan, look at this." She pointed to a survey map tucked between tax papers. Red lines marked planned railroad routes across the territory. "This line runs directly through your property." The implications hit them both simultaneously. Someone with inside knowledge was forcing them off land that would soon become extremely valuable. "Stone," Ethan said grimly, "we need proof." Their eyes met across the table. The attraction that had been building between them crystallized into something deeper. Partnership born of necessity was becoming genuine affection. But with revelation came danger. if Stone was orchestrating their troubles, he wouldn't stop at harassment. The war for Broken Arrow Ranch was just beginning. Eliza stared at the railroad survey map until the red lines burned into her memory. Stone's harassment made perfect sense now. He wanted the ranch cheap before the railroad made it valuable. "We need a strategy," she said. Ethan studied her determined expression. "What kind of strategy?" "The kind that turns his weapons against him." She outlined her plan over morning coffee. A community harvest festival would serve multiple purposes. It would raise money for the ranch payments. More importantly, it would force the town to see her as a person rather than an outsider. "Folks around here don't take kindly to outsiders organizing their affairs," Ethan warned. "Then we make them want to participate." Eliza rode into town that afternoon with a list of every family in Copper Ridge. Her first stop was the general store, where Martha Henderson sorted through fabric bolts. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm organizing a harvest festival to celebrate the community's hard work." Martha's hand stilled on the cloth. "What kind of festival?" "Food, competitions, dancing, games for the children. All families welcome." The older woman's suspicion warred with curiosity. "Who's organizing this?" "I am, with help from anyone willing to contribute." Word spread through town like spilled water. Some families embraced the idea immediately. Others required careful persuasion. Eliza approached each household with specific appeals tailored to their interests. She convinced the baker to judge pie competitions. The fiddle player agreed to provide music. Even reluctant families found themselves drawn to activities designed for their children. Stone appeared at the ranch 3 days before the festival. His expensive carriage looked absurd against the dusty landscape. "Cole, this festival nonsense needs to stop." Ethan stepped onto the porch, positioning himself between Stone and the house. "Free country. People can celebrate if they want. Not when it disrupts community harmony." "Seems to me the community's excited about it." Stone's face reddened. "That woman is manipulating good people for her own purposes." What purposes would those be? Stone couldn't answer without revealing his own motives. He left with threats hanging in the air like storm clouds. The festival day dawned clear and bright. Families arrived at the town square carrying covered dishes and musical instruments. Children ran between booths while parents sampled each other's cooking. Eliza moved through the crowd with graceful efficiency. She praised Mrs. Patterson's apple pie. She organized games for restless children. She ensured every family felt included in the celebration. Her organizational skills became obvious to anyone paying attention. This wasn't amateur enthusiasm. This was professional competence applied to community building. "Where did you learn to do this?" Clara asked, watching Eliza coordinate 3 activities simultaneously. "St. Louis. I organized charity events for families displaced by the war." The memory surfaced unbidden. Eliza had been 19 when the factory closures hit. Dozens of families found themselves without income or housing. The established charity organizations moved too slowly to help. So Eliza had organized her own relief efforts. She coordinated food donations from wealthy families. She found temporary housing in church basements. She created work opportunities for displaced fathers. The experience had taught her to read people quickly and appeal to their better instincts, skills that served her well in Copper Ridge. By afternoon, the festival had achieved everything she'd hoped. Families who rarely spoke were sharing meals. Children from different social classes played together. The community was remembering what it could accomplish united. Most importantly, people were seeing Eliza as an asset rather than a threat. "This is the best harvest celebration we've had in years," Sheriff Briggs announced to the crowd. Applause filled the square. Eliza felt the warmth of acceptance she'd traveled so far to find. But Stone wasn't finished. He arrived during the evening dance with 3 men Ethan didn't recognize. Their gun belts and hard eyes marked them as hired trouble. "This gathering is illegal," Stone declared loudly. No permits were obtained for public assembly. The music stopped. Families clustered together uncertainly. Eliza stepped forward with calm authority. "Mr. Stone, this is a private celebration on public land. No permits required." "Private? This looks like commercial activity to me." "No money has changed hands. These are neighbors sharing food and fellowship. Stone's hired men positioned themselves strategically around the square. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Then Ethan surprised everyone. The man who barely spoke in town walked to the center of the square. His voice carried to every corner. This woman organized something beautiful for our community. She asked for nothing in return except the chance to belong here. He looked directly at Stone. Anyone who opposes that kind of generosity needs to examine their own heart. The crowd murmured agreement. Stone found himself isolated, his hired guns suddenly seeming like overkill against women and children. "This isn't over, Cole." "No, I don't reckon it is." After Stone left, the celebration continued with renewed energy. But the confrontation had crystallized something important. The battle lines were drawn. Later, as families packed up their belongings, several approached Eliza directly. "Thank you for bringing us together like this. Haven't seen the community this happy in years. You've got our support, whatever comes next." Back at the ranch, Eliza and Ethan counted the donations collected for ranch expenses. The amount wouldn't solve their financial problems, but it would buy them time. More valuable was the political capital they'd earned. Stone had overplayed his hand by bringing guns to a family gathering. People who might have stayed neutral were now choosing sides. "You did something important today," Ethan said. "We did something important." He moved closer, drawn by her strength and intelligence. She didn't retreat. "Eliza, I need to tell you something." "I know." Their first kiss happened naturally, without drama or declaration. It felt like the inevitable conclusion to weeks of growing connection. But even as they discovered love, danger gathered on the horizon. Stone's public humiliation would demand retaliation. The railroad deal was moving forward. Time was running out. The festival had won them allies, but the real fight was just beginning. The morning after the festival brought unwelcome visitors. Banker Webb arrived with two men in dark suits who examined the ranch like undertakers measuring a corpse. "These gentlemen represent interested investors," Webb announced. The investors walked the property boundaries, taking notes and measurements. They showed particular interest in the creek running through Ethan's land. "Water rights are valuable in this territory," one remarked loudly enough for Ethan to hear. After they left, Eliza found Ethan staring at the creek. His jaw was set in the stubborn line she'd learned to recognize. "They're circling like vultures. Let them circle. We're not dead yet." That evening, Eliza spread her research across the kitchen table. Town records, property deeds, and newspaper clippings formed a complex puzzle. She worked by lamplight, connecting pieces that others had overlooked. The pattern emerged slowly. Stone had been acquiring properties along the proposed railroad route for months, always through intermediaries, always at below-market prices, always after the owners faced mysterious financial difficulties. "Look at this," she said, showing Ethan a deed transfer. "The Morrison Ranch sold for half its value last spring, right after their barn burned down. Coincidence? 3 coincidences. The Patterson place went cheap after their cattle got sick. The Williams family sold after their well went dry." Ethan studied the documents with growing anger. He's been planning this for months. Longer. Some of these property transfers go back 2 years. The scope of Stone's conspiracy became clear. He had systematically weakened his neighbors, then swooped in with rescue offers at bargain prices. Now he was applying the same strategy to Broken Arrow Ranch, but Eliza had uncovered something Stone didn't know she'd found. Railroad correspondence hidden in town hall files revealed the exact timeline. Construction would begin within 6 months. Property values would triple overnight. "We need to warn the others," she said. "Others?" "The families still in his path. The ones who don't know their targets." They started with the Henderson family. Martha's husband, Frank, listened skeptically as Eliza outlined Stone's pattern. "That's a serious accusation," Frank said. "Look at the evidence." She showed him the property transfers, the suspicious timing, the railroad maps. Frank's skepticism transformed into fury as the truth sank in. "That snake has been planning to steal our land." Word spread through the ranching community like wildfire. Families who had viewed each other as competitors suddenly recognized their shared vulnerability. Stone had counted on their isolation to prevent them from comparing experiences. Sheriff Briggs arrived at the ranch the next morning with disturbing news. Someone broke into the town hall last night, made a mess of the record room. Eliza's research materials had been stored there for safekeeping. Now they were scattered and partially destroyed. Anything missing? Hard to tell, but whoever did it knew exactly where to look. The message was clear. Stone knew about their investigation and was willing to destroy evidence to protect his scheme. That afternoon brought another escalation. Ethan found his prize bull dead in the north pasture. No obvious cause, no signs of struggle, just a valuable animal mysteriously deceased. Poison, Sheriff Briggs confirmed after examining the carcass. The harassment was becoming more sophisticated and more dangerous. Stone was escalating toward methods that could harm people as easily as livestock. That evening, Eliza made a proposal that surprised Ethan. "Marry me." "What?" "Not for love, though that's growing between us, for legal protection." She explained her reasoning with cool logic. As Ethan's wife, she would have legal standing in property matters. More importantly, their combined resources and skills made them stronger than either could be alone. "This isn't how proposals usually work," Ethan said. "Nothing about our situation is usual." He studied her face in the lamplight. Determination and vulnerability warred in her expression. She was proposing a partnership that served practical purposes, but her feelings were clearly deeper than strategy. Yes. The simple word carried more weight than flowery speeches. They were committing to face whatever came together. But Stone wasn't waiting for wedding announcements. The next morning brought his most direct challenge yet. He arrived with papers bearing official seals and legal language. "Eminent domain proceedings," he announced. "The territory is claiming your property for railroad development." Ethan examined the documents. "This says the railroad needs the entire ranch. Infrastructure requires significant land allocation." Eliza appeared beside Ethan, her presence steady and calming. "These papers are dated wrong," she observed. "The railroad survey isn't complete. No route has been officially approved." Stone's confidence flickered. "The survey is a formality." "Then so are these papers." She pointed to specific legal language that invalidated the documents. Her knowledge of business law became apparent as she dismantled Stone's legal threats, piece by piece. "You can't claim land for a railroad that doesn't legally exist yet." Stone's mask of civility finally slipped. "You think you're clever, girl, but you're still an outsider in a place that doesn't want you." "She's my wife," Ethan said quietly. The lie became truth in that moment. Whatever legal ceremony might follow, they had committed to each other in the way that mattered most. Stone's face darkened with rage. "This community won't stand for this kind of contamination. This community voted with their presence at the Harvest Festival. We'll see about that." After Stone left, Eliza and Ethan stood together on the porch. The sunset painted the desert in brilliant colors, but storm clouds gathered on the horizon. "He's going to escalate," she said. "Let him. We're ready." But neither of them fully understood how far Stone was willing to go. The gloves were coming off. The real battle for Broken Arrow Ranch was about to begin. The next phase would test everything they'd built together. Stone's retaliation came swiftly. The morning after his confrontation at the ranch, Sheriff Briggs found dead fish floating in the town's water supply. Someone had dumped poison upstream during the night. "Whole towns without clean water," Briggs reported. "Going to take days to clear the system." Emergency town meeting was called for that evening. Stone wasted no time connecting the crisis to recent events. "This contamination started right after certain troublemakers began stirring up our peaceful community," he announced to the packed meeting hall. His meaning was clear without being explicit. Blame was falling on Ethan and Eliza. But Eliza had prepared for this moment. She stood calmly and addressed the crowd. "Mr. Stone, you seem remarkably well informed about the source of this contamination, almost as if you knew it was coming." Stone's face reddened. "I'm trying to protect this community from outside agitators. By poisoning our water supply? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Stone realized too late that he'd walked into a trap. That's a ridiculous suggestion. Eliza pulled out a document from her research. This is a purchase order from your hardware store, dated 3 days ago, for industrial chemicals commonly used to contaminate water systems. The crowd murmured with growing suspicion. Stone's preparation was becoming evidence against him. I run a legitimate business. I sell supplies to ranchers and miners. To miners? There are no active mines in this territory. Frank Henderson stood up from the crowd. Unless you count the mining you've been doing in our property records. Other ranchers joined the confrontation. Martha Patterson described the mysterious cattle illness that had forced their sale. Jim Williams talked about his well suddenly going dry. Each story followed the same pattern of crisis, followed by Stone's generous rescue offers. You've been manufacturing these problems, Henderson accused. Stone tried to regain control. These people are trying to distract from their own suspicious activities. Why would a woman travel halfway across the country to marry a man she'd never met? Because someone in this town forged letters to arrange it, Eliza replied smoothly. Clara Martinez stood up from the back of the room. Her confession about the letters had already circulated through town, but now she provided crucial context. I wrote those letters because I could see Mr. Stone's real intentions. He's been asking questions about Ethan's property for months, specific questions about water rights and railroad access. Railroad access? Sheriff Briggs stepped forward. What railroad? This was the moment Eliza had been building toward. She produced the survey maps that Stone thought he'd destroyed. The railroad survey that shows tracks running directly through the properties Mr. Stone has been acquiring. The maps spread across the table revealed the scope of Stone's conspiracy. Red lines connected every property he'd targeted. The proposed route would make him enormously wealthy while displacing dozens of families. Stone realized his position was collapsing. Those maps are confidential government documents. How did you obtain them? From the town hall files, public records that you tried to destroy 3 nights ago. Sheriff Briggs moved closer to Stone. You broke into the record room? I was protecting sensitive information. By destroying evidence of your own crimes? The crowd's mood shifted decisively. Stone's supporters melted away as the truth became undeniable. His carefully constructed image as community protector crumbled under the weight of evidence. But Stone had one final gambit. Even if these accusations were true, you have no legal authority to stop legitimate business activities. No, Sheriff Briggs said grimly. But I do have authority to arrest you for fraud, conspiracy, and destruction of public property. The sheriff's handcuffs clicked around Stone's wrists. The sound echoed through the silent meeting hall like a judge's gavel. This isn't over, Stone snarled as Briggs led him away. But it was over. His network of accomplices scattered. His financial schemes collapsed without his coordination. The railroad company distanced itself from his unauthorized activities. Within a week, property owners along the route received official notices from the railroad. Fair market value offers for easement rights. No forced sales. No eminent domain threats. Just honest business conducted in daylight. The Henderson family was among the first to receive compensation. Their gratitude toward Eliza was overwhelming. You saved our ranch, Martha said with tears in her eyes. We saved each other. That's how communities are supposed to work. The transformation in town attitudes was remarkable. Families who had viewed Eliza with suspicion now sought her advice on business matters. Her intelligence was recognized as an asset rather than a threat. Even more significantly, the conspiracy's exposure had revealed the interconnectedness of their community. Problems that seemed individual were actually shared challenges requiring collective solutions. Clara Martinez organized a proper wedding ceremony for Ethan and Eliza. The entire community participated in the celebration. Former opponents served as witnesses to their union. I never thought I'd see Copper Ridge come together like this, Sheriff Briggs observed during the reception. It just needed someone to show them what they could accomplish united, Eliza replied. The railroad compensation solved Broken Arrow Ranch's financial problems. More importantly, It provided seed money for community improvements, a new school building, better roads, a proper medical clinic. Eliza took the lead in coordinating these projects. Her organizational skills, proven during the Harvest Festival, now served the entire region's development. But the personal transformation was equally significant. Ethan emerged from his isolation to become a community leader. His quiet strength provided stability during the transition period. Their partnership had evolved from necessity to genuine love. The arrangement that began with forged letters had created something authentic and lasting. Stone's scheme had backfired completely. Instead of dividing the community, his attacks had unified it. Instead of destroying Ethan and Eliza, his opposition had strengthened their bond. The man who had sworn he'd never take a mail-order bride had found something better than he'd ever imagined. A true partnership built on respect, love, and shared purpose. Their victory was complete, but the real work was just beginning. 6 months after Stone's arrest, Broken Arrow Ranch bore little resemblance to the failing property Eliza had first encountered. Fresh paint gleamed on the house. New fencing stretched across green pastures. Cattle grazed contentedly in fields irrigated by the creek that had caused so much trouble. The railroad compensation had exceeded everyone's expectations. Fair market value for easement rights had transformed struggling ranchers into prosperous landowners. The community that Stone had tried to divide through manufactured crises now thrived through honest cooperation. Eliza stood on the porch watching Ethan work with a new colt in the corral. His movements showed the confidence of a man who had found his place in the world. The isolation that had defined him for years had been replaced by purposeful engagement with his neighbors. "Mrs. Cole, you have visitors," Clara called from the house. 3 women approached the ranch in a wagon loaded with children and supplies. Eliza recognized them immediately. Mail-order brides who had written to her seeking advice and encouragement. "We heard about what you accomplished here," said the first woman, Sarah Jenkins. "We're hoping you might help us find the same kind of acceptance." Eliza had been expecting this visit. Her story had spread beyond Copper Ridge through railroad workers and traveling merchants. Women across the territory were learning that success was possible even in hostile environments. "Acceptance isn't something others give you," Eliza explained as they settled on the porch. "It's something you earn through service to the community." She outlined the principles that had worked in Copper Ridge. Identify genuine needs, offer practical solutions, demonstrate value through actions rather than words, build alliances one person at a time. "The Harvest Festival was brilliant," Sarah observed. "It forced them to see you as a person instead of a threat. But it only worked because we addressed real problems. Empty gestures don't build trust." The afternoon stretched into evening as Eliza shared detailed strategies for community integration. Each woman faced unique challenges, but the underlying principles remained consistent. Sheriff Briggs arrived as the women were preparing to leave. His news brought the final resolution to Stone's conspiracy. Railroad trial concluded yesterday. Company paid full restitution to all affected families. Stone gets 5 years in territorial prison. Justice had been served through legal channels rather than vigilante action. The community had chosen law over vengeance, setting a precedent for future conflicts. What about his accomplices? Scattered to the wind, Banker Webb lost his position and left town. The hired guns found employment elsewhere. The criminal network had collapsed completely without its central coordinator. Stone's removal had ended the threat permanently. That evening, Ethan and Eliza walked through their property as the sun painted the desert in brilliant colors. The land that had nearly been stolen now represented security and prosperity. "You ever regret coming here?" Ethan asked. "Never, though I didn't expect the journey to be so complicated." "You mean getting shot at and threatened by powerful men?" "I mean falling in love with a stubborn rancher who thought he wanted to be alone." Their first year of marriage had tested every assumption about partnership. Eliza's business acumen complemented Ethan's practical skills perfectly. Her social intelligence balanced his straightforward honesty. Together they accomplished things neither could have managed alone. The community had recognized their value. Ethan served on the town council while Eliza coordinated regional development projects. Their influence extended far beyond Broken Arrow Ranch. Clara wants us to stand as witnesses for her wedding next month, Ethan mentioned. Clara's romance with Sheriff Briggs had blossomed during the crisis. Two lonely people had found companionship through shared purpose, much like Ethan and Eliza themselves. She deserves happiness. Her matchmaking may have been deceptive, but her intentions were genuine. Speaking of matchmaking, we received another letter today. Ethan pulled out correspondence from his pocket. A railroad engineer in the next territory was seeking a mail-order bride. He had heard about their success and hoped Eliza might recommend suitable candidates. "Word is spreading," she observed. "You thinking of going into the matchmaking business?" "Maybe. There are a lot of lonely people in this territory, and a lot of women seeking new opportunities." The idea had been forming in Eliza's mind for months. Her experience proved that carefully arranged marriages could succeed when both parties shared compatible goals and values. Summer brought a celebration that marked the community's complete transformation. The first annual Copper Ridge Unity Festival drew families from across 3 territories. What had begun as Eliza's desperate attempt to gain acceptance had evolved into a regional tradition. Ethan served as festival coordinator while Eliza organized the various competitions and activities. Their partnership had become the model for community cooperation. "Look at this," Clara marveled, watching children of different backgrounds playing together without tension. "This is what we were fighting for," Eliza replied, "a place where everyone belongs." The festival raised money for a new church and expanded school facilities. More importantly, it demonstrated what communities could accomplish when they focused on shared interests rather than artificial divisions. As autumn arrived, Eliza discovered she was carrying their first child. The news filled Ethan with joy and terror in equal measure. "What if I'm not ready to be a father?" "You weren't ready to be a husband either. That worked out fine." Their child would be born into a community that valued intelligence and character over superficial differences. The next generation would inherit the inclusive society they had fought to create. Years later, when historians wrote about the transformation of Copper Ridge, they would focus on economic factors and railroad development. But the real story was simpler and more profound. Two people who had sworn they would never need each other had discovered that love could overcome any obstacle. A man who had buried himself in isolation had learned to lead his community. A woman who had searched across a continent for belonging had created it through service and determination. The mail-order bride arrangement that began with deception had produced the most authentic partnership either had ever known. And on quiet evenings, when they sat together on their porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in brilliant colors, they marveled at the unexpected paths that had brought them home.